Hello everybody, welcome to our Lent Mystery Knit-Along for 2025. Very excited to have you with us. This year we are going to be knitting a blanket in chunky yarn. You should hopefully have received a welcome letter. If you haven't got your hands on one yet, it is available to download from the Victoria Methodist Church website, and I'll ask Vicky to put a link to that in the description below. But the welcome letter outlines everything you should need to know to get started for the knit-along, including the yarn you need, the needles you need, the release dates of all the different documents each week, etc., that sort of thing. In this video, I'm just going to demonstrate a couple of the techniques which might be new to some of you who perhaps haven't been knitting for very long or not very confident at your knitting. The vast majority of this blanket is very straightforward to knit, much easier than previous projects, you might be pleased to hear. It's nearly all just simple knit and purl stitches, front and back. You will be knitting with 129 stitches, I think it is, across the width of the blanket, so because it's quite a big end result. So there is quite a bit of counting involved. So to help with that, we advise the use of 6 stitch markers. You don't have to use these, but it does make the counting easier. So these can be anything. You can get shop bought ones like this, or you can use little loops of yarn, anything that just slips onto the needle, moves along with your fabric, and then you slip them from one needle to the other every time you get to them. So I'm just going to demonstrate. If you haven't used stitch markers before, they're very straightforward. This is how you would use them. So you would knit a certain number, this is all outlined in the pattern, you would knit a certain number of stitches, and then it tells you to place a marker for the first time, and then on subsequent rows you'll be slipping the markers. So place marker is abbreviated to PM for place marker. You put it on the end of when you're ready to do so, put it on the end of the right needle. And then you just carry on knitting, have it dangling down the front if your next stitch is a knit stitch, and you carry on knitting like that. So you can see it sits between the stitches on the needle, and then when you're working on the other side, when you come back to it, you'll be instructed to slip the marker like this. You slip it from one needle to the other, and then carry on. Anyway, that's what your stitch markers look like. They just sit on the needles and help with the counting. So a lot of the time you'll be slipping a marker, counting, I don't know, 20 stitches or something, knitting 20 stitches until the next marker, so it means you don't need to count, you can just knit between those sections. So that's stitch markers. Right, the next thing I would like to demonstrate to you is how to make a bobble, or at least my take on how to make a bobble. There are many different techniques and methods you can use to make bobbles in knitting. Some of them require a crochet hook, some of them you sort of work on subsequent rows. I've experimented with a few, and this is the one I like because I think it's the most straightforward. I wouldn't do anything for a quick fix. These are a couple I made earlier. So they're quite big bobbles when they're knitted in chunky yarn. They're quite fun to do. So if you turn to the swatch B section at the end of towards the end of the welcome document, I've sort of laid it out in 5 steps there, and I'll demonstrate that now. So step 1 is, I'm just going to knit along to the middle of this row. So step 1 says, when you're ready to work the bobble, you need to make 5 stitches, where's the middle? 5 stitches out of the next stitch as follows. So everything's going to be worked around this stitch here. So we're going to first of all knit 1 into that stitch, bring the needle back through. We're not going to flick it off the end, so we just leave the needle there. Then we're going to bring the yarn forward and do a yarn over. So the yarn comes around the end of the needle to the front. That's our yarn over. The right needle goes back in, and we're going to knit another stitch, Repeat that, so the yarn comes back, the needle comes back through to the front, another yarn over, and finally we're going to knit our final stitch. And at this point then we flick the whole stitch off the end of the needle, and if you see here we've got 5 squeezed very tightly together, 5 stitches there. This is probably the most difficult. I'll just demonstrate this again actually. This is probably the most difficult part of making a bobble, this first row. Oops, there we go. So I'll start that again. So 5 stitches out of 1, we're going to knit 1, but leave that on the needle, yarn over, back through, knit 1 again, through to the front, yarn over, and finally knit 1 more stitch, and then we get rid of it off the left needle, and there everything's pulled a bit there, but you can see the 5 stitches all sitting there on the right hand needle. So that was step 1. Step 2, we turn the work, so this means we're going to turn, so we've got the back of the work facing us, and we need to purl 5. The first stitch feels a bit strange because the yarn is coming sort of from the wrong part of the fabric. You're used to the yarn coming off this needle, but just go with it. So we're going to purl that first one. They're all quite close together, so go quite slowly because they tend to jump off the needle together. That's the second one. Third one. Oops. And there we go. Purl 4 and 5. Oops. Okay, and then step 3 is to turn the work again, and this time we're going to knit 5. So bring the yarn right to the back as if you would ordinarily to knit. And you can see there's a bit of a ridge forming. This is the bottom of the bobble. We've got these 5, we're just going to purl 5. This is a bit more straightforward here because everything's loosening up nicely. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Step 4, turn the work again. Whoops! And we're going to be, so these are the 5 stitches, they're all spaced out now because they're a bit loose. So these are the 5 stitches. We're going to be reducing these down to 3 on this row. So we're going to purl 2 together. So instead of putting the needle through as if to purl 1, we're going to catch the second stitch as well, and we're going to purl these 2 together like that. There we go, this is quite fiddly. Then purl 1 stitch, and then purl 2 together again. Oh, there we go. That was step 4, and finally for step 5, turn the work along one last time, bring the yarn behind because we'll be knitting. So we're now working with these 3 stitches because we reduced on the previous row. We're going to knit 3. 1, 2, 3. You can see a nice big bobble forming. Sometimes they pop through to the back, so just keep pushing it forwards. There's our 3 stitches we've just worked. We need to reduce these back down to 1 as follows. Bring the penultimate stitch, just worked on the right needle, so that's this one here. I'm going to loop it over the back of, over the end of the needle. So if you put your left needle in, that second one along, and very slowly, so you don't lose the other one, put that over the end of the needle. So we're down to 2 stitches, and we're going to repeat that. So hook that penultimate stitch, bring it over the end, but don't lose the other one. And there we go. That's it. That's how to create the bobble. So we're back down to 1 stitch, and then we carry on. Knit the next couple of stitches quite tightly, just so that the bobble sits up nicely on the front. And I will just work 1 more row so you can see what it looks like once it's secured in with a second row behind it. So I will just work along to the end of this row. Now when you get to the point where the bobble was on the previous row, you'll see it all feels quite loose, and in case the bobble has wandered through to the back, keep pushing it to the front and then knit quite tightly around here just to secure it really well. Oops. There we go. How many have I done? So I've just knitted another row so you can see how this looks properly secured from the front. Sits beautifully there. You can manipulate it a little bit into a proper circle, but they look great, I think. This is, as I say, it's the method I prefer, but there are many other methods. So if you don't get on with this one, do have a look on YouTube and try another. Hopefully you'll find one that works for you. There we go. Have a lovely Lent. I hope you really enjoyed the knit along, and take care. Bye bye.